you can ask any big YouTuber. They would actually disagree with me. But as someone who makes content which isn't very high quality and doesn't take a lot of effort, it's not bad. But sometimes you just, it's just hard to pull yourself to do these things. That's very stressful, and there's also a lot of stuff going on with school right now. I'm getting ready to graduate in about a month and a half. So yeah, I'm basically just transitioning from my childhood to adulthood, and it's a lot of pressure and stress right now. One with all the school assignments and stuff, getting all that turned in and done, making sure my grades are good enough to actually graduate. Which at this point, I think I'm good. I don't know if fourth quarter matters as much as the other three. It's whatever though. I'm fine. I'm gonna pass. Then there's also colleges. I got into a college. I'm not sure if I'm going there though. I'm still waiting to hear back from another college I applied to, which I really want to go to. It's kind of stressful. There's just a lot of stuff going on right now. So I'm gonna be honest. I was laying in my bed for like an hour procrastinating before I got up to record this video. But when I first started recording, I thought I could do more of this. But honestly, if you want me to be honest with you, completely honest, I said it 3 times, so I mean it. It would not be a fun video to watch. Honestly, 4th time now. What are we looking at in the future here? Portugal takes that, Spain takes this. Yeah, I mean, we all know what's going to happen. It's basically just the big, powerful countries on the outside colonizing, while everyone else just sits and watches. I mean, of course, you have the race to the Pacific over here in Eastern Europe, which honestly would be fun as hell to watch. Latvia would probably win that because they have a pretty good head start for whatever the hell they're doing right now. But other than that, there's not much I could do with this. But yeah, I'm gonna end the video here. I want to say thank you guys for watching. Thank you for sticking through with it. If you have, I want to say thank you to everyone who watches the videos and comments. And, I see most of the I don't see most of the comments. I see some of the comments. I read through them. If they make me laugh, I'll give you a heart. Or if it's a good idea, I'll give you a heart. Whoever suggested this video, I hearted their comment right before I got up and started recording. So thank you for giving me something. I couldn't take your idea and make it better, so that's my fault. It's a good idea. My execution just sucks. Once again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll check you guys. I just need to go to sleep, I think, actually. I'll see you guys in the next video. And of course, thank you to all the super fans. This includes Kylie Speaks Plays, German Edits, Arena Patrick Clauser, Life Lamal, JB Countryball 12, Friasa, Hammertoad 45, CTG, Canada Flag, Olin Country Ball, Nevada Garbage Trucks, Yakko, DW Cool Dude, and Terminator. Thank you guys.
Artificial intelligence is redefining what's possible. At CoreWeave, our cloud platform is purpose-built for AI to provide the world's leading innovators with the performance and efficiency they need to realize AI's potential today and into the future. We are built for this moment. CoreWeave, powering AI innovations.
Taking a look at a scenario where the NATO alliance attacks Russia. As we know, NATO and Russia have beef that goes all the way back to the Cold War, when NATO was created to stop Soviet expansion into Europe, and it of course has carried on to the current day, this time now focused at Russia and any possible expansion that they are looking to do into Europe. And as we also know, NATO is a defensive alliance, which means that it itself cannot declare war, but what if it could? And what if NATO attacked Russia? Usually we look at scenarios where Russia attacks NATO, and we know how that goes out. I've done that a bunch before, but what if it was the other way around? NATO attacks first, they get the jump on Russia. Does that change the war, how everyone else responds, and who wins? So we'll be looking at that today, and if you guys do enjoy today's video, make sure to leave a like on it and subscribe to the channel if you're new. All that support is greatly appreciated. We had a really good October. It was really good. And hopefully we can carry that on into November and December. I'm almost done with school. I got about a month left-ish. And once I'm done for the semester, I'll be able to make a bunch more videos for you guys, and hopefully they'll be a lot better. Anyway, let's go ahead and jump straight into the scenario. So like I said, NATO can't actually declare war. That's not what NATO can do. There might be some propaganda out there that says otherwise, but I can assure you Article 5 of NATO says that it is attack one, attack all alliance. NATO itself does not hold the power to send a formal declaration of war. And also a lot of the members of NATO do not allow that to happen. That doesn't make much sense. We also know that Russia has been fairly aggressive in Europe since a while now, starting in like 2008 with Georgia, going into South Ossetia and Abkhazia, and then of course in 2014 annexing Crimea from Ukraine, and then again in 2022 when it officially started a war against Ukraine, which has been ongoing forever now. There's been no progress. Stalemates. Very fun. That's not entirely true. Ukraine has gone into Russia. Actually, the Russia's done a few counteroffensives recently. We're not entirely focused on that today, because NATO will be declaring war on Russia, which means that technically NATO has to be red. And for more than a few times in channel history, Russia will be blue. Alright, so here is day one. NATO has attacked Russia. They've officially declared war. In this scenario, we're going to be having it as kind of like a jumping or a surprise attack in more formal terms against the Russians. So, NATO troops stationed in the Balkans will start to move into Russian territory, first focusing in on the area near St. Petersburg, because that's one of the major cities. We also see NATO start to go into Kaliningrad, a pretty big military fortress if you ask me, but they will still try to do some work on it. And what else do we see here? So we know that Ukraine is at war with Russia, and that NATO is a heavy supporter of Ukraine, of course, in this all this equipment that's contributed to the war up to this point. So we can go ahead and throw Ukraine in there, and with that, of course, we have to draw in Russia's claims over Ukraine. And I'm going to be honest, I haven't looked at that in a while, so we're just going to be going off of what I last checked it as, which was something like this. So of course Russia is occupying Donbass, which is the target area, and then of course they have all of Crimea and some of the surrounding coastline. We know that. But what is the world's initial reaction to NATO's attack on Russia? Well, a lot of the world, including even some of the NATO allies like Japan, South Korea, anyone else about Colombia, they would probably denounce this. This is the opposite of the point of NATO. Instead of defending, they are attacking, which kind of breaks the whole point of it. And now people are going to look at NATO as kind of like this aggressive expansionist alliance that some people claim that it is. The world's reaction to this would not be great. A lot of people would not be on board with this. But going back over to the front line here, in the first couple of days, Russia would, without a doubt, be overwhelmed by NATO forces. We've seen them in Ukraine. They haven't been doing too much. And that's exactly why the additional 32 countries into the war are going to be able to do this much damage in such a short amount of time. Now, what about nuclear weapons? We all know that Russia is teasing using nukes. Russia has said, like, hey, what if we use little tiny nukes instead of big nukes? They're not very different from conventional bombs, of course. That's not a good idea. Don't do that, because the U.S. would not allow you to do that. And by that, I mean they would respond to that. We don't want that to happen, because that's nuclear war. Not good. We also know that Russia's working in nuclear doctrine that should release soon. Whatever's in that, hopefully nothing too crazy. But just for the sake of the scenario, and also for the sake of the channel, we don't use nuclear bombs, because if we do use nuclear bombs, then colors don't change. It's just everyone dies. That's not very fun to watch, not very entertaining. So of course, we will not be using nuclear bombs in this scenario, or pretty much in any other scenario that has nothing to do with nuclear bombs. So NATO's conventional army is putting work on Russia. They go ahead and capture all of Leningrad, and the NATO troops in the Baltics continue their advance, getting right towards St. Petersburg and closing the city. So what this encirclement achieved for Russia is probably panicking. They're going to go ahead and draw Belarus into the war. We all know that Belarus is Russia's closest ally, if you want to call it an ally. It might low-key be controlled by Russia, maybe a puppet state or a satellite state, however you want to look at it. But adding Belarus to the war serves two purposes: to slow down NATO and to distract NATO, and that's exactly what's going to happen here. With Belarus entering into the war, NATO would probably already expect this to happen, so they would more than likely have troops on the border ready to jump into Belarus, and that is what we see here. However, what it also does is that it slows down their advances in the Baltics. With this event, Russia is able to recuperate a little bit, bring their troops over, and push back the NATO front near St. Petersburg, saving the city for now. They'll probably focus mostly on the Baltics because that's like the weakest area of NATO, that's like the weak link. So they'll push this front line back pretty good. Elsewhere though, we see a combination of Polish and Ukrainian troops doing crazy things in Belarus, knocking out this country with ease. Well, not completely, but they definitely are doing a lot of damage. Additionally, we now see Russia go ahead and exert its military forces fully into Ukraine. Right now, they aren't using their entire military to invade Ukraine. We know that, but now they will fully send the house in. They're like, go get these guys out of the war. That's what they do here, except it isn't too effective. The Ukrainians have, of course, dug themselves in, and Russia's advances into Ukraine would be pretty slow if this were the case. Okay, so Europe is at war with Russia. Fun. Russia's also going to try to get themselves some more allies. They'll go down to Serbia and be like, yo, you want to join the war? Serbia, if they have any brains, will not join this war. I mean, just look at where they're at. They're not going to join the war. NATO doesn't immediately search for an ally. They don't really need one because they are pretty efficient in their jumping of Russia to this point. But there might be some other countries lying around that might want to join this war, like Georgia. I won't throw them in just yet, but do note that they are gearing up and getting ready to join this war and open a new front for NATO. For now, though, they will continue to focus in on Belarus, now capturing Minsk, the capital of Belarus, and completely capitulating Belarus. So with them knocked out of the war, it is now once again Russia versus NATO, and the NATO troops are conventionally way better off than Russian troops. Technology is better, supply lines at this point would probably be better. Leadership is better, that's a big one. The generals, better, we know that because of what Russia has done to its generals. They get fired a lot. Sometimes they disappear. But NATO will now kind of bulk out its front line in this area, and that purpose is, of course, is to capture Moscow, which somewhere over here. I've said this so many times before, but Russia's such a vast country, and especially on this map, it's hard to kind of pinpoint where Moscow's at. I believe it's like right there, though, somewhere in this area. I really don't know. Speaking of, I released a community post a while ago talking about how I want to revamp the world map, and I've started to do that. First of all, I have an alliance layer now, so we can see the alliance, in this case is NATO. You can also see that I can just completely get rid of the map. That's fun. Just water and vast void of nothingness. And alternatively, I can also get rid of the ocean now. So I will continue to add to this. I want to add capital cities next and maybe some more alliances. But as promised, or as I said, I want to revamp the map, and that's exactly what I've started to do. Back to our war, though. Russian forces in Ukraine are being overwhelmed. This has a lot of factors to it, like the influx of Turkish and Spanish troops into Ukraine, but also a lot of French and British troops pushing up on this little front over here, which is kind of really pressuring these troops in this area. So as those troops continue to push forward, it will also cause the troops in Ukraine to go backwards, as to not get cut off or encircled. So this is going pretty good, and now Ukrainian troops are pushing out from the area that Russia just abandoned, and the front line continues to move forward. At this point, Russia has been completely overwhelmed. They are now ran out of St. Petersburg as that city is captured by Finnish troops. They're completely cut off from the Baltic Sea and start to lose all ground over here in the west. NATO is effectively pushing back the Russians. Their armies are just simply better. I don't think there's much of an argument to that as much as there used to be. I think by now we know that NATO is far more powerful than Russia is, and if a war were to ever happen between the two, conventionally, Russia would get its butt kicked. It's kind of common knowledge now. We've seen Russia's forces, not great. But yeah, NATO pushes through Russian territory, and there comes a point in Ukraine where they also start to push back Russian troops, as areas like Kherson are finally liberated after months and actually years of being under Russian control. Next up, we see NATO try to focus in on Crimea, but this offensive is failed as Russia is able to hold on to the area pretty well. Next, they try to go for Donbass. Similar to Crimea, the NATO troops are able to take it. However, though, they do start another offensive out from the northern area of Ukraine into Russian territory, and this is just another morale booster for Russian troops as they see their country getting pushed back pretty endlessly. Now at this point, the world has seen that Russia is cooked. They're not going to be able to win this war. And with the entrance of Georgia into the war and the opening of a new front line in the Caucasus Mountains, Russia is, well, they're desperate. So they will go to kind of their other satellite state, sort of puppet, kind of not really, but sovereign, but not really, Kazakhstan. Now, Kazakhstan, I said that, but they really aren't anywhere like. No, I just said that, but Kazakhstan isn't really that similar to Belarus in the sense of being controlled by Russia. Kazakhstan is its own country. Belarus, it's kind of, infiltrated by the Russians a little bit, controlled by the Russians, just a tiny bit. Kazakhstan, not so much. But still, Russia has influence over this country, and that influence is enough to pull into this war. So they do. And what does Kazakhstan offer to the Russians? Absolutely nothing. Maybe some resources, maybe some uranium, but since uranium isn't being used in this war, that's pretty useless. So Russia's going to need another ally, and luckily they have a pretty close one down over here in the east, that is Iran. So if Iran joins the war, and what we know about Iran is that they also are trying to achieve horizontal nuclear proliferation, which is just achieving nuclear diplomacy. They had a lot to do with that. The U.S. has stopped them from doing that. Cyber weapons and stuff, and has shut down Iran's nuclear program. Why am I mentioning this? I have no idea, because nukes aren't being used. But aside from that program, Iran's armies are actually still pretty strong, and they will definitely give Turkey a run for their money. But what do we know about this region? Iran has a very big enemy, and that is Israel, who joins the war on the side of NATO. Now, would Israel actually join the war in real life if this hypothetical situation actually happened? I don't think so. And that's because Israel is, they're kind of strained right now with the West, especially, or specifically, I guess, the United States has kind of, like, said, calm down, Israel, like, stop doing all the horrible things that you're doing. Israel has said, no. And that might kind of strain them when they join this war, but I think just because Iran is in the war, Israel would go ahead and join. And, they're not going to fire nukes at each other because they can, but they will definitely be firing a bunch of missiles at each other. Also, I do want to give a shout out to some of you guys who told me a little bit about Lebanon, how Lebanon's government actually isn't aligned with Iran, but it's more so Hezbollah that is aligned with Iran. And Lebanon itself is fairly neutral, if not the United States. So they just weren't informed me on that. If that's not true, let me know. But your peers told me that it was. So also concerning Palestine, I'm just going to be leaving them out. I don't think Israel would focus on Palestine, or technically Hamas, but really it's Palestine, as much if they were drawn into a world war like this. Why did I say world war? Because, this is only a war between Europe and Russia. Well, that's because China just joined the war on the side of Russia. This is huge. Obviously, we all know that China is the second strongest country in the world, one of the greatest economic countries in the world. The second most populated country in the world, I can keep going on, but this country is very strong and offers a lot, especially military-wise for the Russians, who are definitely lacking. Numbers may say not, but definitely kind of see practical use, especially in Ukraine, that their weapons are a little outdated. Maybe don't use Soviet weapons, perhaps. So what does China joining this war bring to the conflict other than just the total destruction of humanity? Well, it brings a whole new front theater for NATO to worry about, and that, of course, is going to be the Pacific theater. Similar to World War II, Japan provided a big distraction for the Axis. They distracted the United States long enough for Germany to do a bunch of bad things. Of course, that came back to haunt them because Japan bombed Pearl Harbor and brought the U.S. into the war. But the distraction here is much of the same. I don't think China's going to be bombing anybody to bring any major power into the war, because all the major powers at this point are already in the war besides India, and India will remain neutral as well as Pakistan. So the blue team is going to go ahead and declare that they are going to finish off NATO and the free world once and for all. They're going to end the United States' police reign over the world, and a few countries are liking the sound of this, specifically North Korea, who, as we know, has sent troops to Ukraine. Interesting. Very interesting. North Korea joins the war on the side of the blue team. They won't be offering too much. And as far as other additional allies that the blue team could get, I don't think there is any. They could get Venezuela. Well, really, that's it. But I don't think Venezuela is in the economical situation to join a war right now, so we'll be leaving them out. There's a few countries in Africa that could end up joining. I don't think they do. I think this just kind of remains like a Eurasian war. Maybe like Syria, we'll get to that later. Maybe Saudi Arabia would stay out of it. Armenia and Azerbaijan wouldn't get joined. Armenia and Azerbaijan would probably stay out of it. Maybe Azerbaijan joins the red team, but I highly doubt that they do. They kind of have that slight Russian alignment in them. Central Asia, they don't offer anything, so they're not going to join. Southeast Asia, Vietnam could join, but I don't think they do right now. But our main focus is going to be in the Eastern Asian region because there is 4 countries here that I see that could join the war, and one of them will. And that one country, of course, is going to be Taiwan. We all know the beef. Taiwan is beefing with China, and Taiwan is very capable of defending itself, just not in the long run. In the short sense, sure, they could probably hold China off for like a few months, but eventually they would get overwhelmed and taken. But now that they're in this war with the United States, they get that kind of backup and that kind of keeps them into the war. So that's why they joined. They know that they have the backings of the United States. So they're not necessarily as afraid of China as they used to be anymore, especially in this scenario. But with Taiwan joining, that actually does kind of serve as a distraction for China. Now, of course, they're going to centralize and focus their military on this front line over here, but they do still have to alleviate some of it for Taiwan. Now, of course, all these countries joining aren't going to have an immediate impact. It's going to take a while for their armies to get ready and over here on the front line. So as for now, NATO is going to go all out in an attempt to capture Moscow in hopes of ending this war before they have to fight countries like China and Iran. They start bulking out towards the middle, going right towards Moscow, and eventually a spearhead starts to form. This spearhead goes right across Russia. It's very similar to Blitzkrieg. In fact, it's being led by Germany. And eventually they reach the so-called gates of Moscow. Something like that. Is that actually where Moscow's at? I don't think so. Well, NATO troops will start to encircle the city in hopes of capturing it, obviously. Putin will probably flee the Kremlin and go into somewhere in Siberia. But NATO troops completely encircle Moscow and the siege begins. Elsewhere, NATO troops do a very good job at finally pushing Russia out of Ukraine completely and slightly expanding their Caucasus Mountain front line. They make strides over here to the Caspian Sea, knocking out a big region for Russia down here. And also, by the way, this area for Russia is very important. A lot of resources here, and if they were to lose that, then they would be pretty screwed. So that's why we haven't seen too much NATO activity in this region. Russia has been prioritizing this region and defending it, and they've done a very good job at doing so. But now it's time to reintroduce something that I haven't done in a very long time. Naval battles. You guys actually like this a lot, and I don't know why I stopped doing it, but we will go ahead and color in the Navy of China here and exactly what waters they are currently patrolling and protecting. So as we can see, it makes a lot of sense. They're of course protecting their own coastline, going into this sea right here, all around North Korea, and then up over here they have a big naval blockade of this inner sea. I need to learn the names of these areas. They're using these Russian islands to their advantage, setting them as a staging point for the barrier. But yeah, now it's time for the red team's navy, and that's mostly going to be the United States. Their navy is of course going to be protecting Taiwan, along with the Taiwanese navy itself. But these guys, of course, are stationed all over the place because it's the United States. So we'll be coloring the waters around the Philippines red because, as we know, the U.S. has a good bit of military bases in this region. Same thing with South Korea and Japan. All kind of U.S. military bases in the region. But what about the South China Sea? We know that China loves this thing, and they have a lot of speaks with a lot of people. We'll also clean this thing. So what exactly do we see happening here? Well, for the sake of this video, China will be leaving it alone and mostly focusing on their own coastline area. Not only they have a bunch of artificial islands here that they built military bases on. I don't care. We're ignoring it. So the Chinese and U.S. navies will clash over here on the coast, and China does have this slight advantage here since they are, of course, the defender. They're closer to home. The U.S. is all the way across the Pacific Ocean. Is there going to be any naval games over here? No, not really, because Russia's navy at this point has probably been completely destroyed. Okay, so how is the siege of Moscow going? Not so great, because Chinese and Iranian troops are finally here, and NATO's front line is being pushed back. They're just simply outnumbered greatly, and this little spearhead is pushed all the way back to where it started, and the front line is still NATO. This gives time for Russia to recuperate, it gives them time to recruit, and it gives them time to resupply. Okay, so the U.S. Navy is now in the Persian Gulf for the third time in history. Not the third time in history, but third time in recent history. And Iran is, they're fighting a naval battle. And it's probably not going to end so well for them. It appears that NATO is trying to open a new front in Iran in hopes of knocking them out of the war. And if you knock Iran out, that's pretty big because that is one of the three big contributors for this alliance. And it definitely gets you a lot closer to ending the war overall. Now, of course, you still have problems like Russia and China, but less problems, good. Now, how cooperative would some of these Gulf countries be with the U.S.? I'm actually not too sure. Now, the UAE and Oman at least do cooperate a little bit. Saudi Arabia has been pretty interesting recently, but I know the U.S. does still have military bases throughout this region. Kuwait as well, Jordan, and then of course Israel. There might be a little bit strained here Navy-wise because this is a little bit out there. They do have their Navy base in Seychelles, something like that, which is a pretty big one, pretty big, good refueling island for Diego Garcia. But yeah, let's go back to the conventional fighting. More specifically, the Caucasus Mountain region, where the U.S. and its allies, or I guess I should say NATO and its allies, sorry, are, well, they're doing very good things. They've captured the entire Sea of Azov area, which is huge. It officially kicks Russia out of the Black Sea. That's going to hurt them economically, but also they are starting to close in on these important Russian supply regions. And Russia is just simply overwhelmed, and they will now order the Chinese and Iranian troops to this region to hold off NATO's advances. Okay, cool, they get there and they start pushing back. Issue: Finland is a major contributor to this war. The Finns, as well as the Swedes and the Norwegians, have started a new offensive in the front, going towards Moscow from the north. Since these guys are built different, since they are used to the cold, even the Russian winter, this is going extremely well, and it's going to cause another alarm to go off in the Kremlin, because now it just appears that NATO is simply overwhelming even Russia with the help of China and Iran. And Iran may not even be sending troops because they have to worry about their own domestic territory with the U.S. being right there. And of course, they do go to Turkey, but this border will probably not see any action because of the mountain ranges that go through this area. Look at me. I'm acknowledging geography for once. Speaking of this region, going down to here, Iran's Navy just got obliterated. That's not good. And the U.S. is now going to go ahead and try to stage a naval landing, but this actually fails due to poor planning on the U.S.'s part, and Iran achieved victory in defending a possible amphibious invasion. That's a big moral victory. Might have impacts on the war. Probably not though. Okay, what about the Pacific theater? What's happening here? Well, the U.S. Navy and the Chinese Navy are still throwing hands, and no one is really winning. We know that the U.S. Navy is the greatest in the world, and that China's Navy it's big, but it's not very efficient. There's a joke that can be made there. But with that in mind, we can go ahead and conclude that, maybe having a more efficient Navy is better than having a huge Navy. And the more efficient Navy will probably do a lot more damage to the big Navy than the big Navy would do to the efficient Navy. So South Korea joins the war. This is going to be for a pretty obvious reason. They want to get rid of North Korea. The South Korean troops will start to advance into North Korea. Realistically, North Korea would respond to this by nuking, but we're not allowed to do that, so no boom booms for you. The South Korean military is one of the best in the world. North Korea is not so much. They do have a lot of manpower though, so they might be throwing bodies. It's kind of like how the Soviets did. Nonetheless, South Korea's armies will advance and take Pyongyang, the capital of North Korea, and this is a big victory for the Red Team. We also see the introduction of the South Korean Navy into the war, and with this, they're able to push back the Chinese in the regions that they have already captured that are parallel to the land. Okay, cool. So the Red Team is now getting the upper hand in the Pacific region. Why not go ahead and throw another country into the mix as the Philippines join the war on the side of NATO? We know why. They have their conflictions with China over the South China Sea. Is that enough to warrant them joining the war? Maybe not, but I think the Philippines would probably get their hands twisted behind their back, or I guess their arms twisted behind their back by the United States saying, hey, we protect you, join the war. So they do. And with a few more thousands of troops on the front line and a possible landing in China or even the Korean Peninsula, China is going to be forced to draw some of the troops back from Europe. And unfortunately for Russia, that is not a good thing because we know that Iran has also done that since the U.S. is thinking about staging a landing on one of their coastal areas. Yikes. Within the matter of a few weeks, Russia loses a ton of land. NATO's advances are going well. Now, the Russians will stage a pretty large counteroffensive, but this is kind of seen as a last-ditch effort. And when last-ditch efforts happen, you burn a lot of manpower very quickly, you also lose political control, and you also sometimes lose your capital city. NATO captures Moscow. And of course, this is very significant, but it's not the end of the war, and that's for multiple reasons. China at this point is the strongest country in this alliance. you've taken out sort of the second strongest, and you still have to worry about the third strongest. So until half of Russia is red and all of Iran is red, this war will continue on, and that's exactly what we see. But now NATO's focus has kind of shifted, Instead of fighting this three-front war in the Pacific theater and the European theater, we're instead going to fight solely in the European theater and the Middle Eastern theater. We're not going to worry as much about the Pacific theater, and that's because we don't have to. If we take out Russia and Iran, I'm sure that they can force China into a peace deal. So NATO will once again ramp up its invasion of this area, taking out this very crucial area of Russia completely, and that will cripple Russia, and they will pretty much be on the fallback for the rest of this war. So that front didn't last very long, admittedly. Now we have to shift over to the Iranian front. And Iran is geographically in a very good spot. They have all these mountain ranges in their country over here. It even extends up to here. They do have some kind of flat areas, or not flat, but flatter areas in this region. But right here, there is a spot where it's still mountainous, but it's not as mountainous as these other surrounding regions. So if you really wanted to penetrate into Iran and try to get to Tehran, you would have to go through Iraq. So how do you do that? Okay, so Turkey's going to go ahead and attack Syria. I mean, they're already kind of doing that in real life, but they're going to officially declare war and go in. And with the help of U.S. and European troops, they're going to take out this country with ease. Also, Israel would probably help out as well. And no big issue. Of course, you're going to have to deal with some of the groups in this country. They're going to constantly be pulling out attacks on your troops. But this is war. And modern warfare specifically has a pretty large target on civilians. And militaries will target civilians because they are a part of the war effort. Modernly, it wasn't always like that in the olden days. But my point with that is that if there's a terrorist in a civilian building, you go ahead and you bomb that civilian building because it's modern warfare, and that's just kind of how it rolls nowadays. It's very sad, but that is just kind of how it is. So terrorist groups not going to do too much damage, but Iraq is now declared war on. So terrorist groups are going to do much damage, but now we see NATO troops kind of just move through Iraq. Of course, Iraq is going to be their sovereignty is going to be infringed upon, just having troops move through your territory. But is this like an official declaration of war? Not really. Iraq isn't going to be buddies with Iran. They are rivals. The whole Iran-Iraq war. I think I'm pretty much associated Iraq with Iran a lot in my videos, which is very inaccurate. It's just the scenario that has the war. But here, they just kind of let the troops move through their territory. You're going to either declare war on us, you're going to lose, or this is going to happen, so we might as well just let you move through our territory. So, in other words, Iraq gets military access to NATO to get to Iran. Iran is pissed off about this, but oh well. Now NATO troops punch through the mountains, because screw mountains, and they start to push up towards Tehran. China is very worried about this. So what they're going to try to do is they're going to try to retake North Korea, which they do, and they're also going to try to take South Korea, which they kind of do. They also get a pretty big military victory against the United States Navy, and now border the coastal areas of Taiwan, and this is not good for Taiwan, because the Chinese want to make a landing north, threatening Taipei instantly, which will kind of distract the U.S. from an amphibious invasion that we were just going to attempt to pull on Iran. So that gives Iran a little bit more time. Let's check in on Russia. Still not going too great. We're now entering Kazakhstan. Really, the front line wouldn't really look much like this. It would kind of look like spiderish, like just going out for major cities that Russia has, because Russia is such a vast country, it's almost impossible to invade it, as I've shown here. Just ask Germany, or ask Poland, or France, or Poland really. You can ask a lot of countries. It's not easy to invade Russia. So yeah, they'd probably just kind of single out these major cities, go for them. It wouldn't look as consolidated as it does here. But NATO will actually stop its advances into Russia, and now we focus onto Iran, because like I said, Russia has been pretty much taken care of, so let's focus on the next country that needs to be getting rid of, which is Iran. Going here, it goes extremely well. Turmoil starts to kind of take over this nation, and then collapses. Okay, NATO won, right? No, not yet. China has been hesitant to kind of end this war. Of course, they joined it to protect Russia, but Russia has been taking care of it at this point. They also joined it to kind of protect Iran. Iran is gone. So what do they have left to protect? Well, I guess their own self-interest. Their self-interest, of course, lie in the South China Sea and Taiwan, as well as sort of Korea. But at this point, both sides are more than likely exhausted. So China will go ahead and finally facilitate a peace treaty, or peace treaty negotiation, which lead them out of the war, and also draw the borders of Russia and Iran. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we draw up in the Treaty of Moscow. Alright, this peace treaty looks like nothing happened. That's because mostly nothing did happen. Even though that the NATO alliance was the attacker here, we do still have to realize that the age of taking a bunch of land at least for the West, has pretty much ended. So what that means is that instead of taking land and hurting your opponent, the West is more likely to change your government and force you onto their side, as opposed to taking a bunch of land. Now that isn't entirely true here, as we can see Finland is quite large, but it still is basically practice. We can imagine that Russia is given a new government, a new pro-Western government, and that kind of chain of Putin being elected is over. He's probably dead in this case, or maybe not. Maybe he's living the rest of his days in Mongolia or China, or maybe he's a changed man. Maybe he's still living there. Who knows? But in this fictional scenario, Russia's government is changed by NATO, and we see quite a bit of land exchange, a little bit of land exchange. We see the Baltics walking in. We see that Finland and Estonia now war with each other, cutting Russia off completely from the Baltics, as Kaliningrad has also been annexed by Poland. We see the Kola Peninsula, we see Karelia, they all go over to Finland, and Poland gets a little bit of a chunk out of Belarus, as well as Latvia and Lithuania. They get chunks out of Belarus. And that's for Belarus itself. It is made into a state. Its government has changed. You'll see Ukraine fully join NATO. They get all of their things in Crimea and Donbass back. And we also see Georgia get all of its equipment back in South Ossetia and Abkhazia, and they also are made into a NATO member. As for Turkey, they get northern areas of Syria, and Syria itself is occupied by the alliance, similar to how the U.S. occupied Iraq after that war. Same thing with Iraq. The government has changed. The U.S. will occupy them, or maybe NATO. Who knows? Israel does not achieve permanent membership. That's pretty obvious. Explain why. And then going over here to the Pacific, as you can see, nothing happened. In fact, nothing happened. There's no change in political stance or international kind of organization over here. Taiwan is still not fully recognized by the world. China still has its claim over it, and the South China Sea is like settled. So basically, this war was all for nothing. The Korean Peninsula didn't change. Nothing. It was all for nothing. The only thing that changed was the European theater and the Middle East. And that's going to do it for today's video. So I hope you guys did enjoy it. This is like the first big Wednesday video that I've done in a while. They've been pretty short. The videos aside from this have been Empire videos or election videos. But this is like the first time that I've done a big war in a very long time. So I hope you guys do enjoy it. Because I enjoyed it. I don't know how I had enough time to record this. It's been 48 minutes. No one's here, so I'm very happy for that. I mean, yeah. So, oh yeah, Age of History 3. I finally played it outside of Sandbox mode. I gotta say, this game's amazing. It's freaking awesome. Issue though, Sandbox mode is very quick. Normal mode takes a very long time. I started the playthrough as it's atomic order, whatever. Apparently, like late 1700s, I formed the German Empire. Oh no, I'm in the early to mid 1800s. I formed the German Empire, and that's all that I've done. It took me like 400 in-game years to do what I needed to do. That's a lot of hours. I've spent a lot of hours playing on my own time. So my main point is that it takes a very long time to do outside of Sandbox mode. So if we ever do another Age of History 3 video again, it might be in Sandbox mode, and that's because I don't have time to do it outside of Sandbox mode because it takes so long. I'll let you guys know more about that if we ever do another one. But aside from that, that's the end of today's video. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next one. And of course, thank you to all our super fans. This includes Pablo Sigma Cat, Sermonator, Georgie Badev, Deathstrider X, Arentine, Hammertoad45, Connor the Gamer, Poland Country Ball, Nevada Garbage Trucks, and DW Cool Dude. Once again, thank you guys.
Jiminy Cricket, you don't even have a club in your hand!
We'll be taking over all of Europe in Age of History 2. Now, I have done Age of History 2 videos before, but we haven't done it in a while, so we're going to be coming right back to it, and we're going to be coming back with a banger, because we're going to be playing as Germany and knocking out every single country in Europe. That's right, every single one of them. Not just, the EU ones. We're also talking about Russia. We're talking about a little bit of Turkey. We're talking about all the way down to Iberia, all the way up to Norway up here, and these islands in Iceland. We're taking over everything. So if you guys do enjoy this video, make sure to leave a like on it, subscribe to the channel if you're new. It really helps the channel out, helps me out. Leave a comment with your input. Let me know if you want to see more of Age of History 2 content. I swear to you, I'm bringing back the alternate future series just soon. Okay, I don't know when. It's coming. Just wait. Hold on. Anyway, let's go ahead and start. So, Obviously, like I said, we're going to be playing as Germany because it's Germany. I mean, who else? I mean, who's the better fit to take over all of Europe, right? And for this video, we are going to be playing on sandbox mode. Now, wait, hold on. Hear me out, okay? It's 9:48 at night. You know, gotta go to school tomorrow. Gotta get this thing done. Also, like, doing that on like normal mode, I'm good for now. I will do it in the future though, probably. All right, so first thing I'm going to be doing is the Chancellor of Germany is first of all I'm going to be spending these points. Let's go ahead and do more research so we get more research points. Stonks, obviously. Can't believe I just said stonks. I'm sorry, guys. You know, I'm really embarrassing myself now. We're going to raise taxes all the way up, and we're going to go ahead and dump a lot of money into research. Actually, we're dumping money into all these things because we have an infinite amount of money. That's how inflation works. Worst case scenario, we just print more money. All right, cool. So we have all of our economic stuff planned out. Now we can go ahead and start the fun stuff, such as, you know, forming the European Union, which includes all this. Now, this isn't all of Europe in real life. This is very wrong. I made this when I was, like, in middle school, so obviously there's some issues, like Turkey all being included. It should only be this part. And then Russia, I mean, this is fairly correct, but it should include a little bit of Kazakhstan.